Hi, this is Vlad from the papers. We're reporting live from Amsterdam for Money 2020. Please join me in a discussion with Fingerprint on the latest challenges regarding fraud in real-time transactions. We're about to hear a lot more about fraud trends and the technologies needed for companies to stay ahead of them.
Traditional fraud controls were designed to answer a specific set of questions. Is this an authorized user performing a legitimate transaction? Now, in the case of APP fraud, it's a legitimate user coming in, passing all the authentication checks, and initiating a payment transfer. But the problem is they're being manipulated to make that transfer. Now, instinctive response from financial institutions is to introduce friction across entire customer workflow. Now, the problem that causes is that it causes frustration for legitimate customers trying to do their own transactions, and hence there's a churn risk. Now, the alternative is device-level intelligence. Using that signals that we collect throughout the customer journey as a continuous signal, we can now answer questions saying, is this customer behavior consistent with the historical behavior, or is there any anomaly? Are there any additional signals like remote control tools that are in play here? Are developer tools being used? And using these signals and mapping them throughout the customer journey, now we can detect high risk of fraud. And in that case, then the institutions can introduce additional friction because there's signals indicating potential fraud, right? These also helps in unlocking additional capabilities. For example, in the receiving end, we can detect if a single device is being used for multiple new accounts, potentially indicating a coordinated scam or a mule kind of network in play.
In the UK, PSR introduced the mandatory reimbursement regime, which turned APP fraud into a customer experience issue, into a direct balance sheet liability shared equally between sending and receiving institutions. What can institutions do now that the financial exposure has shifted onto them?
With PSR and additional EU scrutiny, financial institutions no longer can just say they are stopping fraud. They also need to show audit trails explaining their decisions, why a particular friction was introduced, and why they were able to allow legitimate transactions to go through. Now, device-level capabilities, session-level tracking, allows them to get all the context. What kind of device was used? What is the customer behavior consistency? And other signals that indicate potential manipulation, for example. This gives them the context and the audit trail for financial institutions to track the decisions that these PSR and other regulations require, so that they can move from just stopping fraud, being able to satisfy these regulations without introducing friction for their legitimate customers. Traditional controls and rails for payment transfer scenarios are easily broken by fraudsters. Now, the instinct is to introduce friction for all their customers, but we know there's a risk for financial institutions that there'll be churn due to frustration by legitimate customers. Now, so what is the question is, what is the right answer here, or in balance here? In order for customers to reach that Goldilocks zone, they need to introduce adaptive friction. Now, what that means is that due to using the device intelligence, we track session level attributes that kind of categorizes transactions as a low risk or a high risk for fraud. Now, if based on the device attributes, is this a consistent device that we have seen and the customer behavior is consistent with no other anomalies like remote control tools in play or any other manipulative signals in play, the customers can deem that as a low transaction and allow legitimate customers to proceed with the transfer, or introduce friction in the case of where they detect fraud kind of signals. Those kind of continuous signal enables them to introduce friction and reach that Goldilocks zone.
What kinds of signals are becoming more important in helping financial institutions identify risky behaviors in an era where fraudsters are leveraging AI to mimic legitimate behavior, while legitimate customers are using AI tools to streamline their own processes?
AI has enabled fraudsters to evolve much faster. Now they're able to build sophisticated malicious bots at scale that can introduce complex fraud patterns. Now again, if they introduce friction and manual reviews and controls, and traditional bot detection are no longer enough. So the answer is AI agent intelligence. Fingerprint has recently released an AI agent ecosystem where we detect AI agents and AI assistants via our newly released automation API intelligence. So using that, combining that with our other signals like bot detection, proxy detection, and geolocation spoofing, customers can use that to kind of fight fraud, that AI-enabled fraud easily.